Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Abington Heights School Board meeting for Wednesday, March 19th, 2025. Would everyone please rise and pledge the flag? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mrs. O'Day, roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah.
Here.
Mr. Azar.
Here.
Mrs. Henderson.
Here.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Here.
Mrs. Karam.
Here.
Mr. Moran. Mr. Robeson.
Here.
Mrs. Tierney.
Here.
Mr. Acker.
Here.
8 present.
Okay. May we please have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Thank you. Can we please have a motion to approve the minutes for the meetings of February 19th and March 5th?
So moved. Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney.
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah.
Yes.
Mr. Acker.
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. Are there any board reports at this time?
Mr. Acker, I have a board report.
Okay. Mrs. Karam?
The Finance Committee met on February 26th with our advisors, Zach Willard from PFM and David Payne from PNC, as well as Jim Mirabelli. We were able to narrow our discussion to 6 financing scenarios. If you recall, we were looking at 40 in the last couple months. Our goal at that meeting was to essentially evaluate our interest rate risks. The 6 scenarios allowed us to compare the total financing costs with basically 2 bookends, taking out the minimum amount as aligned with the construction draw schedule, and then conversely, taking out the total amount needed to cover the cost of the entire project, so fully funding the project. We closely examined the interest rate risks and budget impacts through 2034. We also discussed how we intend to use and incorporate our capital reserves in this project. The committee, along with Dr. Schaefer, narrowed our scope of borrowing options down to 2 to 3 of these financial scenarios, and we are hopeful that we should be able to make a recommendation to the board after our next meeting. But we decided to press pause and push our Finance Committee meeting back to later April, early May, scheduled to be determined, after we discuss the project bids, which the entire board will see in hopefully early April. And then we will revisit our financing recommendations based on this new information. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any other board reports? Okay. How about our student representative? Did Mr. McVetti leave you high and dry tonight?
Yes, I'm filling in for Owen this evening. He's not feeling well, but
I hope you told him revenge will be sweet.
Okay. So for our academic report, we want to give a huge thanks to the AEIU for grants awarded to FBLA, mock trial, and the math department. The math department is hosting an upcoming math festival at CSC on March 27th, where students and department members are currently busy with the planning for that event. Interact Club is hosting the Bunny Breakfast, which is scheduled for April 5th at the high school from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. For more information, you could visit the high school Facebook page for the QR code and to register. A huge congratulations to Mock Trial, who is moving on to states, as well as the Science Olympiad, who is also moving on to states. A Day of Song was held for all 3 sections of the music department, orchestra on February 11th, band on February 25th, and choir today on March 19th. This event allows middle school students to travel to the high school to participate in small group sessions led by high school students and then to experience a class conducted by our high school music teachers. Additionally, members of the middle school will be able to perform in our spring concert series. Lastly, for this report, 3rd quarter ends April 4th, and The Sound of Music is scheduled for April 11th, 12th, and 13th. I apologize, but the athletic report is a little lengthy. For our boys basketball, the Comets started off slow but kept pushing and finished their regular season with the number 2 seed in District 2 5A and won another district championship. Their last game was March 7th in the first round of states against Upper Moreland in a 57-60 loss. They had a great season, winning the district championship and hosting the first round of states. Senior Robbie Lucas had a stellar season, reaching many milestones, including hitting 9 threes in one game to go along with a 35-point performance. He also reached the 1,000-point club against Valley View on senior night and ultimately was named LIAA First Team All-Star as well as First Team All-Defense. Jordan Schaefer was also named as an honorable mention selection. For girls basketball, they ended their regular season with a win against West Scranton and played North Pocono in the first round of district playoffs, where senior Maggie Coleman had a great night. She ended the night with 40 points and 12 threes, marking a stamp in the record books for her. The 12 threes gave her the most in Abington Heights school history. She also reached the 1,000-point club in a 56-37 win against Walpolpack on January 23rd. Maggie has also the most career three-pointers in girls basketball history. She was named to the first team for the LIAA League All-Stars, and her sister Emma Coleman was recognized to the honorable mention team. Lily Skoblik was also named as a first-team defense selection. For wrestling, Brian Hurd and Mason Whitney repeated as place winners in the PIAA 3A Wrestling Championships. Brian Hurd finished with 176 career wins and is setting to a new standard at both Abington Heights as well as PIAA District 2. He's the only third, four-time PIAA qualifier in Abington Heights history as well. Mason Whitney finished 8th this season, finishing up his sophomore campaign with his second medal in as many seasons. He is on track to follow in Brian's footsteps as another 4-time PIAA qualifier. Freshman Jake Schiavone fell short but showed great promise in losses, but 2 upperclassmen. His future, as well as the entire Comet Wrestling program, will continue to progress forward by Mason and Jake's lead. For our boys swim and dive, the boys had a great season, only losing 1 meet to Delaware Valley. They had multiple champions for swimming and held the top 3 spots for diving at districts. The 2 swimmers, Jason Casper and Derek Williams, along with divers Micah White and Ryan Hortz, traveled to the state championships this past weekend and performed very well. Jason placed 27th in the 200 free and 22nd in the 100 fly. Derek was 27th in the 50 free, and our divers Micah placed 20th and Ryan placed 16th. For our girls team, they had a great season, only losing 2 league meets to Delaware Valley and Elk Lake. At districts, they had multiple swimmers compete and became champions, including Gia Vicchino, Hadley Palman, and Katie Jermansky, and a relay team consisting of Casey Johnson, Hadley Palman, Audra Wimmer, and Gia Vicchino. The girls had 1 swimmer compete in an individual event at states. Gia Vicchino competed in the 100-yard freestyle and placed 32nd. The girls also competed in the 400 free relay. Gia Vicchino, Audra Wimmer, Ella Bannon, and Casey Johnson were all swimmers for that relay. Although the relay team did not place, all swimmers performed very well. We also had several all-region selections for swimming and diving. Those students included Jason Casper, Derek Williams, Ethan Hortz, Micah White, Hadley Palman, Gianna Vicchino, and Caitlin Jermansky. For Unified Bocce, Team 1 ended the season with 3 wins and 3 losses. Team 2 ended with 4 wins and 2 losses. Team 2 advanced to the playoffs on Tuesday, February 18th at Lakeland High School and finished 5th overall. The team had many highlights on their season, especially at their annual Jam the Gym event on Tuesday, February 4th, where the Abington Heights community, including many other sports teams and coaches, faculty, and other spectators, helped to fill the gym and give our unified student athletes the feeling of a packed house for their competition. It turned out to be a very successful day with both teams winning and the bleachers filled with fans to support our teams. Lastly, for our indoor track, they competed in their last event on Sunday, March 3rd. This was the PTFCA State Championship at Penn State Indoor State Championships. Abington Heights junior Anna Puchalowski finished 16th in the 1 mile. She had a time of 5:12:52, and Tamara Seed in Abington Heights senior finished 16th in the triple jump. She hit a distance of 35.1.25. Throughout the winter, the team has continued to set new season best times and PRs, and most recently at the Garden State Invite at Ocean Breeze Park on Friday, February 14th, junior Anna Puchalowski set a new PR with a 5:04.74, which also set a new AH indoor track record previously held by Katie Dammer. Obviously, you could see our winter sports had a very successful season, and we couldn't be more proud of all of our athletes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, great job.
Especially proud of this young woman named Gia Vicchino
Yes.
that you very smoothly kept naming in the third person. I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
Great season.
Okay, do you want to do public comments before?
Yeah,
us?
we can do that. Yep.
So, we're going to do public comments next. If you want to address the board and haven't passed in a card, please see Mrs. O'Day. We ask that you come forward, state your name, where you live, and try to keep your comments to more or less 3 minutes. First up would be Tim Hoban. Habib, I'm sorry, Tim, I apologize.
My penmanship, it's my fault. It's no fault of Abington School District. I learned how to write. Thank you for the opportunity. 2 quick questions. I'll take much less than 3 minutes. Number 1, I looked on the website. I'm looking for enrollment statistics year to year for the district. Are they available anywhere?
Yeah. Yep.
Where would I find them?
They're in several spots. It's easy to get it on the state website, but I can make a copy.
That's all right.
No,
State website, I could take it from
Yeah,
there.
I have a copy downstairs. It's one page. It gives, yep.
That's
yep.
okay. I can take it as long as I have a jumping off point.
Yep.
Number 2, I attended the meeting, the information session on the project at the middle school, which was very informative. Thank you. And I did have a question about that. Is that a bid contracted price that can't change, or something like tariffs, for example, which could drive construction costs up? If that happened, would that price go up, or are we locked in?
So, I can answer that in I'm going to give a very brief superintendent's report, and that was something I was going to mention.
Okay.
So I
Thank
can
you
answer
very
your
much.
question there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Robin Domenico?
Robin Domenico, Clark's Green. 27-year resident, 4 children that went through this district. The proposed renovations for the middle school is long overdue. No one can argue this. I've spoken to my kids, and the first thing they said is, put up walls. I've spoken to my neighbors, there's been comments on my Facebook post, and no one is against fixing this building. I think we all agree that the district should put the students first in this endeavor. What I mean by this is very clear. The proposed changes do not address the major flaw in this building design. The team areas. This is where the students and teachers spend the majority of their school day. And I know they move around, they go to lunch, they go to gym. Adding a 3rd gym is not a solution for this flaw. It's a major flaw, it's always been a major flaw, and I believe it comes down to safety. Ask anyone what they'd like to see done to this building, and the answer is overwhelming. Fix the team areas, put in solid walls, and I continue to say that a 3rd gym is a want by this board, it's not a need. And I firmly believe that we need to correct the flaw to this building and give the students, teachers, and staff a building that they can work in properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public comments? Okay, Dr. Schaefer?
Sure, thank you. I've got a brief guess I call it a narrative, I guess, today. And Robin, I'll address your comments, and then that'll dovetail, Tim, and into yours, which I was planning to address. And like respectfully, Don, Robin, I would lean into the gym piece, and I'll tell you why. It has everything to do with equity. But when you take a look at the middle school and you take a look at the high school, the enrollment is almost identical. There are 4 grades at the middle school, and there are 4 grades at the high school. They all have state regulations, requirements relative to physical education. The problem that we have is at the high school, there's approximately 17 to 18,000 square feet that is allocated for physical education space. The middle school is around 9,500, but yet the same expectations exist. That is a safety risk in and of itself. And that is disproportionate to a very large degree. Secondly, and what I've told the board before, is the auxiliary gym, which people would refer to as a second gym. If you've been in it, it's approximately 2,400 square feet. It doesn't meet to my mind, the definition of a gym as I see it. And whenever we talk to an architect, what they would tell us is keep the squares, because if we move on to that second stage, we want to take a gym, and in this case, the auxiliary gym at 2,400 square feet, and convert that to classrooms with walls that you speak about. I think that's the most efficient and safest way to do it. The problem with design, and you hit it on the head, is, well, you know, it was a good idea and was fleeting in the mid-'70s, like many ideas back then. But 95% of the students are in a semicircle, half above, half below. That's the worst case scenario for trying to do any type of renovation. It is not safe for students to do, I don't know where we would put them. You couldn't renovate above while they're down below. I mean, just trying to pay attention to that. So regardless, we would have always started with this stage 1. However, there's this probability, and this speaks to Tim, that on one hand, it could be a moot situation in that when we started this project, the board talked about all the risks that were in front of us. One that we spoke about quite frequently was interest rate risk, as it is for anybody, whether you're purchasing a car or a home, or you're looking at home insurance, or for me, grinder pump insurance. It just keeps on, going up. So we had concerns about that. And at the very bottom was bid risk. We've got a construction management team, we've got architects, all of our bid documents that we were working with, 2 different groups. We felt pretty solid about the market and where we were with bid risk. That was 2-3 months ago. Now bid risk is our top concern. It's volatile out there relative to tariffs. We know this in speaking with our construction management team, our architects, and many people on the board have personal experiences, whether they're buying products, raw materials, so on and so forth, from distributors outside the country, things like that. And what I mean by that is, Tim, to your point, I couldn't have told you a month ago how many aluminum smelting plants there were 30 years ago in the United States, but I now know that there were 30. I can tell you that there are 5 now that are owned by 2 companies. And I know that because I know the pricing. I'm very familiar with Johnson Controls and the mechanicals they produce and the high-quality mechanicals they produce because we use them in our buildings as we try to get continuity. What I couldn't have told you 2 months ago was where they're located, which is in Canada. So I now know that bid risk. So On April 2nd, we're going to have a team of architects and construction managers here to talk to the board and the public about bid risk and what we can do to mitigate some of that risk. And one of the things that we can do to protect ourselves from escalating prices is put elements of the project on what we call an alternative bid. So I met with the construction team, I met with the architects, and through those discussions, we thought that it's the most prudent decision to make sure that we protect the district and put the gym on the alternate bid. So what that means is, come April 14th, when our bids go out, there will be the building and the renovations that are bid. And then there are separate alternative bids that contractors can also bid on. And one of them will be the gym. That will protect us come May 15th, when all the bids are publicly announced. Then on May 20th, when the board gets information regarding the bids, we will then know the prices, but we won't be strapped in to a project that escalated in there. The most important piece to this project is the instructional spaces, and I will make the argument over and over that physical education and the inequities that I talked about relative to square foot size are very important. Physical education is very important. That's why it's a requirement. With that said, it is a higher priority to make sure that we have the appropriate classroom space for all of our kids as we build this space for 7th and 8th grade. So that's what would provide us the most protection in this case. That way, when the bids come in and we look at the prices, we'll be able to make an informed decision about the cost of those pieces, versus if we built or bid the 7-8 grade ring, the renovation, and the gym. If the bids escalated beyond a point that we couldn't afford, or we had to trigger another hearing, then we would incur costly delays. So, Tim, I hope that answers your question that way.
I just did the math on 20%, 30%, and it's $60 to $80 million.
Right. Well, so what's important to note too is when you hear a 25% tariff, that's not what is passed on to us. While I don't work daily on the mechanics of tariffs, what I can tell you is that they don't include the labor. So, for instance, Alcoa is the largest aluminum producer in the United States, located in Pittsburgh, and they source a lot of their raw materials from Canada. So they will get those raw materials, let's just hypothetically say at a 20% overage, but they also know what their labor costs are, and that's not part of that. So their labor cost is more than a half of that. So as we talk with our construction management teams and architects, and we won't know till bid day, but right now we're starting to hear numbers on other projects where the real number is close to 10%, which is a very real number, but it's also 15% less than 25. So, there's that, it could be worse scenario. So, okay. So that's what I have. But so on April 2nd, which would be the last board meeting prior to bids going out, we'll have a team here and we'll talk about that. And I would imagine there will be many things that change between now and April 2nd, just like many things changed the last time I talked to everybody at the Act 34 hearing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our next action item is to review the treasurers and bills. Mrs. Karen, would you please give us the treasurer's report?
Sure. We began the month with a cash balance of $28,928,168.14. We took in $3,361,144, $144.20 in monthly revenues. Our net disbursements or expenditures were $5,964,260.25 for a cash balance available of $26,325,052.09.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call, please. Oh, Mrs. Tierney, please. Did you have a question? Excuse me.
But I could
Roll
ask a
call,
question
please.
if you want me to.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
Mr.
8-0.
Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the March 2025 volunteer list.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the request to establish a student activity account for the mini-thon.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the University of Scranton's affiliation agreement for an additional 3 years until December 15th, 2027 to place students for field experiences.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand.
Yes.
Mrs. Karam.
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board consider a motion to approve the rental agreement with Clark Summit University.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
And Dr. Schaefer, congratulations on putting this together. I think our
thanks.
students will benefit greatly.
This time I'd ask the board to approve the Scranton School District Agreement for AEDY program for student 46A, along with the Scranton School District Agreement for center-based emotional support for student 47A.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mr. Azar.
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board to approve the 2025-26 IEDA Notice of Adoption of Policies, and this is through the NEIU, because we like a pass-through through them, so, special ed.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Mr. Acker, ask the board approve the following Abington Heights school job descriptions: human resource generalist and executive administrative assistant for human resources too.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call?
Mrs. Hillebrand,
Yes.
Mrs. Karam,
Yes.
Mr. Robeson.
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney,
Yes.
Mr. Abdullah,
Yes.
Mr. Azar,
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Acker,
Yes.
8-0.
Okay, are there any informational items for the board? Any unfinished business? Mrs. Tierney?
I think this is unfinished business. Is it possible to get an update on how well the cell phone usage is throughout the district? I've had a couple neighbors inquire about what actually is the district doing and is it working?
Yeah, we can gather that information.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other new business? I'd call for a motion to adjourn in that case.
So moved.
Thank you.